Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. I'm just checking if everything's working. Webcam is a bit off. Just got to change something here quickly. Okay. That should fix that. Cool. Can everybody hear me? Is the sound okay? Just drop me a comment if you can't hear anything. Perfect. Right, just about a minute to go. We'll wait for some people to join us, and I will start right on 8 o'clock. Just gotta... Mobile phone is off. All right. Welcome, everybody. It has been a while. It's been pretty busy for me the last half of the year. Been super busy with competitions, testing work. I'm in the process of selling my shop, so it's been a bit crazy, and that's why you haven't really seen a lot of videos from me, and also the live stream has not been happening. But now that most of that is over, I've got a bit of a break now. Plus, the shop is now sold. So I have a lot more time. So this is the first in quite a few. Besides this one, on Saturday, we're having a little talk about monofoils. And then on Monday, I will be talking about some of the North MA foils. But today we're here to have a talk about the Kraken system. I have been using the Kraken for about 4 months now. I've been giving myself lots of time to get used to this and just to really figure out pros and cons. What do I like about it? What I don't like about it? What would I like to change? So I've been mainly testing two different mask sizes. The first one is the 93, which is pretty much my go-to mask length for almost everything at the moment. I've also been using the 103 for race training, and my plan was actually to use this in racing, but the international race events that I wanted to go to didn't happen, and yeah, but I've been giving this quite a good run, so I'm talking about that too. So let's basically get into it. For the people who don't really know about the system that much, the Kraken system is essentially a very modular system that can be basically used with all different disciplines. The big complaint from the last generation of foils from Sabfoil were that for all the different disciplines, for kite foiling, wind foiling, wing foiling, etc., surf foiling, there were different. You needed different masts, different fuselages, and so on. For example, if you were a wind foiler, you had your own mast that wasn't compatible with the surf fuselage. So you had to have like a specific wind foil system, and then when you were um, doing that, you had to have two different masts, and so on. Um, so and also with the kitefoil masts, like the 91, they were too flexible and too skinny for wing foiling, for example. They were just too flexible; it just wasn't a good ride. So you had to have a kitefoil setup if you wanted a light and sort of low drag mast. And then if you wanted the wing foil, you needed like the 92, which was heavier and a little bit, especially thicker cord and also thicker profile, which some people didn't like. And the Kraken system addresses all that by basically having essentially one set of masts. So, for example, here the 93, this works for kite foiling, wing foiling, and for wind foiling. It is completely compatible with all the new fuselages. You got to say that the fuselage has changed also, and it has a much sort of thicker M8 screw plug now, which solves quite a few of the problems that we had on the previous system. Although I personally got to say I didn't really have a lot of problems with the screws coming loose on the fuselage side head on the older system, but I know quite a few people that did. The cool part of the Kraken system is now that there is different base plate options. So here you've got the aluminum base plate. There is a carbon one now. Actually, I don't have that yet. I'll talk about the differences between those anyway later. So you have your plate system, and then you have your Tuttle system. And then if you just want to switch between those, the mast stays the same. So you have this sort of locking system on the mast where you can just slot it into the plate or into a Tuttle adapter. And also, if you are trying to be a bit thrifty and you want to save money, you don't need to have a plate for every mast. So you can have a plate and then share that plate between the different masts. And there, the masts end up costing less than last year's masts if you look at the pricing there. If we have a look at the fuselages, there's not like massive differences. Like here, I've got my 999 set up on the Surf fuselage here. This is essentially the, can't remember the name of this one. Sorry. I got too many. This is the F700HS. And yeah, pretty much it is the exact same thing as the older 700. The main thing now is that it fits onto the other foil. And then here, for example, I've been using this with my high aspect wings. This is the 713, the 713K. The thing that's actually, besides the much larger plug and M8 screw system on these, is that on the kite fuselage, the K fuselages, if you have a look here on the stabilizer, they've actually widened out the seat for the stabilizers so that you can actually put on the surf stabilizers without needing a shim or having that weird seating problem. So they fit on perfectly. However, that is sort of opened the problem that if you put like a normal, like a 399 stabilizer on here or the 376, you do need to use the actual supplied shims. I didn't actually get one, so Jimmy was nice enough to send me the file, and I printed myself these shim adapters, and these give it a nice sort of faired position on there, keeping the same angle. And then there's different ones also for different angles if you need those. But I find the sort of standard angle, which I think is 1.2 somewhere, 1.2 degrees. That is sort of fine for me with the 1000 and the 800 and the 3 and the 740 when I'm riding these. The fuselages are still aluminum. That hasn't changed, and it's probably not going to change in the long run. My opinion on these is I still haven't encountered like a full carbon system. People have made them for their Sabfoil masts. They've made carbon fuselages. They've always been more flexible and not as long lasting. I still have to actually see one that is just as stiff as the actual original aluminums from Sabfoil. But that is not to say that somebody will eventually not make one. Right, does anybody have any just general questions about the system before I get into a bit more detail? If not, well, let's get into it. So I'm just gonna undo this thing, but actually first thing, there's been a few confusions when people are buying these. If you buy the Mast sort of standard, the plate comes attached to the mast with two M6 screws that will be going through here. it doesn't sort of come standard with the quick release system with this quick release pin here. So you actually do need to make sure that when you're ordering your Kraken system, that you do order it with the quick release system if you want that. Sorry about the phone. I thought I'd actually turn that off. Should be completely off now. All right, so I'm just gonna unscrew it here because I have the quick release system in there. You have this screw that pops out with an Allen key. That is the pin that connects the thing in. And once that's off, pops off really easily. So imagine you have this permanently attached to your board. It's actually pretty quick to get it on and off. So let's have a look at a bit more detail of the actual mast system in here. Now, you'll notice that we have this big chunk of metal at the bottom here. And I don't really know why, but Sabfoil doesn't really make a big deal out of this. But it's actually something I've been asking Jimmy for quite some time. This is a sacrificial anode. This is essentially there to basically stop the reaction between the stainless steel parts and the aluminum parts and the carbon parts, reacting with screws, inserts, etc., with the fuselage. And you can see here that after a few months, this will focus, that the anode is no longer really shiny and so on. It's actually getting eaten, and it means it's doing its job. If you actually have a look, I've actually purposely been not washing the gear. So if you look at the plate, I mean, it is dirty, just as I haven't washed it. But you'll notice that there isn't a lot of oxidation on here. If we have a look at the fuselage. Yep. Again, this fuselage hasn't been washed in sweet water since I've had it, so since May. And you can see there's no oxidation. This is just some salt on there because I've not used it in a couple of days, so the salt's drying out. But the fuselage itself is clean, so there is no oxidation happening there. And that is quite cool. So there's actually an anode also in the fuselage. Should have actually prepared that and actually taken the wings off, but I don't have my Torx keys here in the office. But just trust me that there's actually another sacrificial anode in each fuselage, which again prevents the aluminum parts from oxidizing. Steve is asking, what do I use the 713 for? Going fast. It's essentially the racing fuselage for the high aspect wings. It has a little bit, the mast is set farther back on that, and it's slightly longer, which allows you to go a little bit higher upwind, and it gives you a bit more stability when reaching. It costs a little bit on the speed, having a little bit longer fuselage, but the added pitch stability you get through that just allows you to push harder. So overall, you're going faster. It's worth knowing there is no need for the anode on the mast when using the carbon base plate. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Although I would say just leave it in. Having two anodes is still better than one. And it just spreads out the reaction a bit more because you still have carbon and inox parts on the mast. But you are right, it's not 100% necessary. So if we look at the plate itself is fairly heavy. This is a matter of contention. I know a lot of people's hopes were when the system came out initially that the masts were going to be a lot lighter than the previous generation. And unfortunately, with the aluminum base plate, they are about 75 to 100 grams or even more heavier than their previous it's called ancestor mast. So, for example, my 92 that I've been using for a while, compared to the 93 with the aluminum plate, there was a 150 gram difference there. So they are slightly heavier. That said, I have not actually managed to break any of these masts yet. Whereas, for example, the 92 and especially the 82 masts, when I was learning to freestyle and learning new tricks, I cracked quite a few. On the 92, I cracked less than I did on the 82s, but still there was damage to the masts when I did bad jumps. And so far, this 93 has survived very well. So the durability of this is quite good. When I eventually get a carbon plate, I would love to see how long that lasts. In theory, it should last just as long, but there's obviously going to be a durability difference between a carbon and a aluminum milled plate like this. What else can I sort of say about sort of this system? Now, when using this system, like I say, everything goes really fast and it's all super good. You, however, do have to keep a few things in mind when using this, especially like here on Fuerteventura, it's sandy and dusty. If you look inside here, that pin, if it will focus, has a decent amount of grease on there to have that system work. And obviously, if you when you unscrew this pin out of here, you have to be really careful to not get sand in these threads, because with all the grease and so on, that will stick quite a bit, and then you have to spend quite some time before cleaning that off to get the fit right. So I really recommend. It's not really a system that you can just easily take apart, like on a full-on sandy beach when there's like 20 knots. You're going to get sand in it, and there's going to be fit problems. Also, especially because it's quite low tolerances on the plate itself, so it makes more sense setting up somewhere where there isn't deep sand. And the worst possible thing you can do is actually drop the plate or the pin into deep sand, and then yeah, it's gonna have to take a few minutes to clean everything again, make sure the threads are completely clean before putting it back together. But otherwise, it saves quite a lot of time. The caveat with that is, for me personally, it doesn't save a lot of time having this system. And that's because I have a lot of different foils. I know that's not most people, but I switch between like the surf foils and the racing or the high aspect foils quite a bit, and they do have different positions of the plate on in the tracks, obviously. So I tend to have to move the stuff around anyway. Plus, I have different boards, so it does save having, when I switch from a kite foil board to wing foil board, or from two different wing foil boards if I have all plates on them. But typically, if I'm switching between surf and the racing setups, I have to move the plate anyway, so it doesn't really save me a lot of time. Because I still have to undo the screws and move the plate around. If, however, I am only like if I have a week of I'm only training freestyle or wave riding, then yeah, it saves a lot of time because I just pull my board out, put it on the ground, mast goes in, foil goes in, I'm out in the water. I don't have to deal with repositioning the plate and actually putting in 4 screws every time, and also making sure I hit that point. It's always in there. So that does save a lot of time if you actually are using essentially one type of setup. There isn't like a massive amount of difference between, for example, all the surf foils like the 999, 899, 799s that I use, the 945, and so on. They're more or less going to end up in the same place the way I have them set up. So that's it. It's just when I change to the race setup, then I have a completely different position for the foil. So for a guy like me, if you have a lot of different foils from Sabfoil, then it doesn't really save you a lot of time. All right. Another thing I want to note is actually, if you look at the connection part at the bottom, there's these little extra washers we get, and those actually also go on to these inserts here. They're a bit oversized. I actually asked Balls what really their main use was and why they didn't just make the holes normally. Balls basically said it's just another sort of similar function to the sacrificial anodes to prevent oxidization. And it also just a little extra protection for the actual hole and the screw. So yeah, what I have actually been using these, I got lazy just putting them in without those little ferrules or washers, and it works fine also. The screw just goes in a lot deeper. Right. Any other questions so far? Oh. All right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the different masts. Obviously, all the masts are not exactly the same. There is a bit of a difference, for example, between this 93 and the 103. They're not the exact same profiles on these, and different sort of template to them, like a different outline. I said the 93 for me is a very, very good all-round mast. They still get delivered in their sort of really shiny, let's call it mold release finish. I gotta say, this one here, the finishing of the trailing edge was really, really good. Didn't have any noise issues and so on. The mast is just as stiff as the 92. I don't feel that it's any more wobblier, even though it's got a much thinner profile than the 92 did, and also a much thinner cord. So it's actually faster through the water than the 92. It's just all around much more fun than the 92 was, or even the 82. Didn't have any sort of ventilation issues with this. Could go really fast. And I've actually been using this more for like speed runs and so on than I have actually the 103, because I find that this is just a little bit more under control than the 103. Okay. Another cool thing compared to the other years, if you look here, we actually have replaceable inserts now, replaceable cylinders like you just we're used to from windsurfing. So if you do manage to screw something up on your by screwing by cross threading, for example, the screws, and damage the cylinders, you can basically just pop the cylinders out and pop new ones in, and yeah, you can save your mast. If you screwed up the inserts in the old system, it's practically game over. You'd have to cut the mast open to get that big steel insert out that was in there, and it just wasn't really feasible to repair those masts. Whereas here, you can just pop out those cylinders and replace them quite easily. It's the same thing. You have all these cylinders on the base plate side of the mast. These all can be pushed out and replaced if you screw them up. And in theory, like if you're not using these two M6 holes, which are there to secure, that come when you buy the mast, a complete mast, you can actually pop these out if you're not going to use them. Saves a little bit of weight, but also it's nice to have them spare just in case you do need to replace these. Now, let's talk a little bit of a caveat on the carbon plate also. The hole distance, this hole here on the carbon plate is slightly closer to the board in that respect. So you do need to basically put washers on the system here when using the carbon plate. And that's sort of slightly annoying, because that would mean that if you have, for example, aluminum plate on one board and the carbon plate on another board, it wouldn't be immediately interchangeable. You'd have to, put the shims in to your mast first before you could use it on the carbon. You'd have to take them out again when you were using the aluminum. Not quite sure why that is, but that's just the way it is at the moment. I gotta say, I don't personally have the carbon plate. So this is just from, for example, Steve told me about it. A few others told me about it too. So that is the main issue. All right, now here we have the 103 mast. It is a little bit thinner. I'm probably you cannot see this on camera, but it has an actual thinner profile. It's more of a racy profile. This mast works really good, especially for like flat water racing where you're really just pushing the limit. It's really good upwind. That extra length allows you to lean the board more and gets you upwind a lot better. So for a racing style thing, it's amazing. What I did find is that this is slightly more flexible than the 93. So for like jumping in freestyle, already because of the length, but also just because it's slightly more flexible, it doesn't feel as in control. And in sort of really sort of choppy, strong wind racing conditions, it also just doesn't feel as good. So when racing, you sort of have to measure up what compromise you want to do. Do you want to go for longer so you can stay over the chop, or do you want a bit less sort of flexibility in the mass and have that control to be able to push it? I still haven't 100% made up my mind yet, really, which is better, but I'm tending to go towards the 93 a bit more for going fast. If there's an upwind leg in a race, obviously makes more sense to have a little bit more mast length. Right. That sort of covers the technical side of these. Just generally for me, I'd also like to say, like for the high aspect wings now, the ability to put the surf stabilizers on there is quite cool. I actually like, for example, the S370 stabilizer more than the 399 on the 1000 and on the 740. For some reason, it just for me feels just more in control than the 399. And so I can actually go faster. So it's actually nice being able to put it on there properly at a decent angle, not have and also not have that gap in there anymore. That needed to be basically sorted out with having the shims in there, so that the lip of the edge of the seat wouldn't sort of cut into the bottom of the stabilizer. So I actually tend to ride the high aspect wings also with the 370. That's sort of my 370 is pretty much my go-to stabilizer for everything at the moment in regards to foils from Sabfoil. Okay. Any questions on the technical side that or anything that I've missed so far? Okay. All right. I'm trying to think of if I've missed anything. Here we go. Oh yeah, Steve. Like Steve said, it is necessary to check the QR fitting after a few months. Yeah, it does eventually age. Yeah, it can move. Essentially, I mainly just check it about once a week and just tighten up the screws as it needs be. Anything that's sort of screwed together can start moving. I haven't actually had to remove a shim or anything like that yet, but you're gonna see that. I mean, it's a pressure system, so that eventually it's gonna start wearing on that head, and then you're gonna eventually have to replace it. You can also just replace that entire brass bracket anyway, and then you don't really have to worry about things too much. But you should check on the system if it's getting loose. There are, like I said, solutions by taking out the shim and then also just replacing that bracket to tighten everything up again. All right. There is quite a lot of choice now in regards to fuselages. You've seen the two ones I use. There's obviously the super short fuselage now for the high aspects wings, like sort of like it's the same as the 647 from last year. Conical washers are not used with the carbon plates; they don't fit. Yeah, so I didn't know about that because I don't have the carbon plate here yet. And really, the carbon part doesn't really need that because you don't have an inox connection to the aluminum. it's not. I was about to say, yeah, the the fuselages now, there's quite a lot of choice. So if you're looking, for example, using the high aspect, sort of more surf style, you have the shorter fuselages for that too. For the more stable race side, because I've had quite a lot of also customers last year that they said they really loved the 1000, but the 647 fuselage for them was just a little bit short, that they didn't feel as comfortable yet, and so they were like wanting a little bit longer fuselage. So for them, for example, the race fuselage, the 713, is also a good option for somebody who's just sort of getting used to the high aspect wings and just would want that little bit more pitch and roll stability. Yeah, and you've got the same with the surf fuselages, because you have your different sizes there now too. You also have the different sizes of the wind foil fuselages too, so you can really sort of go sort of more towards freestyle and wave, a little bit more tighter turning, and you can go for quite stable setups too. All right, Daryl Forsyth's asking, what's my view on the 376 compared to the 399? The 376 is a lot more loose, a little bit more slippery. I find it really works well with the 740, and I don't really like how it works with the 1000 and the 1100. Sorry, the 1111. It's just, for me, it's a bit too loose for the bigger high aspect wings, but for the 740, it works really good. I've tried it a few times with the surf wings. It's really agile and surfy, but I tend to prefer the 370 still. The 370 still has just a bit more front foot pressure for me, and it feels just a little bit more in control, especially if I'm sliding out the foil or something like that. The 376 just for me is a bit too agile. But then again, I know people who really love the 376, even with the bigger wings, because they really like that sort of fast, sort of yawing turn. So try it and see if you like it. But for me, it's more something for the really small high aspect wings and for racing. Okay, and is there anything else I'd like to mention? I would have to say also the geometries on the fuselages have changed, sort of stabilizer angles and so on, and also mast positions on some of the fuselages. So keep that in mind when you're switching over to the new system. The first thing I would recommend, especially on the high aspect things, is essentially check that your board has the more or less right track position. I find everything nowadays has moved, especially with the high aspect things, just a little bit more forward. So just be aware of that. Oh, Thomas Lepre. So as I understand, the new fuselages fits on all the masts, and the 713 and this 7 are options for the M6 wings. Yes, exactly, Thomas. That's it. So basically, you can put all the fuselages fit on all the masts. The K masts, the K fuselages, sorry, are for the M6 wings, like the W1000, W1000. I can never get it right. 1110, and obviously, yeah, the 740, etc. Evo Gephardt. How does the 699 compare with the 799? Love this the S370. I haven't been sent a 699 yet by Sabfoil to try. I've had a very short session on one from one of the other team riders. It's, in my opinion, it's quite different to the 799. It feels it's hard to explain. It doesn't quite have that sort of, it's quite the way the 799 rides. It's a bit hard to explain. It's sort of got this very sort of ballsy way of riding. The 699 is not quite like that. I find the 699 is actually just a little bit smoother on the takeoff. Jumps a little bit less aggressive than the 799. I can really see the 699 is really great kite foil thing as basically something that would replace the 633. I think that's a good replacement for that. On the short time I was on it, I felt comfortable right away with it. It's fast. It's nice and fast wing. It's definitely faster than the 799. It's definitely faster than the 633. It handles breaching a lot better than, for example, the 633 or any of the other sort of surf wings before. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I can't really say that much more because I haven't spent a lot of time on it. I just gotta say it does feel different than the 799, just like how the 999 feels quite a bit different than the 799 too. They don't really have that sort of balls feel to it. And before you ask, I haven't tried the new 430 yet either, but it looks really cool. So as soon as I get that, I will try that out quite a bit, and then Steve is asking, Sabfoil technical bar charts show that the shorter Kraken masts have more flex compared to the longer Kraken masts. Surely this can't be true. I don't think that's right. But you also have to compare, like if you're comparing the B series. Just let me have a check on that. I haven't actually had a look at the bar charts if they've been updated. Masts. Compare. For some reason, I'm having problems navigating the website today. Where is the mast chart? Steve, if you want to send me a link, because I can't find the charts anymore on the website. Why is that not working? Come on. There we go. So 73. Yeah, I can't sort of confirm that. Like for me, the 103 is slightly more flexible than the 93. Yeah, that's my experience with that. It is a thinner profile, so yeah. But then again, it's not much, but it's definitely not that the 103 is stiffer than the 93. And I would doubt that the 73 is less stiff than the 93. Okay. I would expect that from the B series that's just come out now, which it's not even on the website. So, yeah. For what would you recommend the new 603 fuselage? If you want tight turning, something that's really agile, which has sort of a very tight radius, and actually is also really good for pumping because you have less resistance, so it costs you less energy. That's what the 603 is really good. When I'm riding axis foils or like the north foils and so on, everything, I use a really short fuselage for surf and for pumping, and that's what the 603 is really good for. Okay. Um, One thing I'd like to sort of say is essentially about the fuselage and mast connection. Like as you see, it's obviously a lot stronger, but the way the system sort of works and sort of fits together, it's not conical like you've seen on some of the other things. So it basically bottoms out at the bottom. Um, and I mean, last year's system, I preferred how easy it was to get off. You just knock the fuselage once hard, and then you be able to pop the glider off. Here you basically gotta spend some time hammering the tail, hammering a bit on the front wing, sort of just easing the glider off, and that just takes a little bit more time. That said, it is a much sort of stronger connection, and you're not very likely to have it come apart on you on the water, and you're not going to have the screws coming loose on you all too much. Okay. So if there's no more questions, we've been going for almost 40 minutes now. So if there's nothing else, I'll probably end the chat here. And thanks for watching. And join me on Saturday if you want to talk about monofoils. Like I said, I've got the new monofoil from Triton, the T1. And that is actually been a surprise. It's actually worked a lot better than I thought it would. I've had monofoils before, but I'm also not only going to talk about the Triton. I'm also going to basically cover the whole concept of monofoiling and what to look out for and what it's all about. So thanks for watching. I hope I answered most of the questions you guys had. If you have any more, just dump them below in the comments and I will answer them as I read them in the next coming days. Thanks, Steve, for a lot of the questions and also sort of keeping me up to date with what's happened with the carbon base plate and so on. And hopefully I will be getting some more gear from Sabfoil too. For example, I really would like to have a longer test of the 699, some of the other fuselages too. And also I really want to see what the difference is between the Black Series masts and obviously the K masts that we have now. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the water. Rock on.